Okay, all right, really good. Well, for those of you that I have not met yet, I'm Nikki Ramirez and I am a local human resources consultant. I have been in the HR business and leadership world for over 20 years. I had my first job writing an employee handbook policy manual back in 1997. So I've been at this a long time, and I hope that that experience today benefits everyone in our community. I'm happy to share freely and openly the information and the knowledge that I've gathered. I've been staying completely, like overwhelmingly up to date with this whole topic and how it affects employers, because we know that things are moving very fast right now. So even as I was starting my day at 8 a.m., I was on a webinar hosted by a law firm that I trust and admire their work for a long time, making sure that my content was up to date and ready to go. So thanks for joining me. And I hope that we get to spend a little bit of time getting to know each other when the time is right. So I can't wait for our kind of normal things to bump back online, but I'm happy you're here today. I'm happy to share the information. So here's the plan. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to knock out some compliance topics that people are asking me about. So I work with clients on an ongoing basis. So I have a handful of clients that work with me all the time. And so they've been calling, for weeks. We've been helping them on this. And then we have so many people in our community that have questions. So I've been trying to track those questions carefully and develop research-based thoughtful responses regarding compliance. So we're going to talk about compliance. Then we're going to talk about leadership and how this time more than ever is our time to step into our leadership in our community, especially as it relates to our relationships with our employees. And so we're going to talk about what I've coined and created for us for this particular situation is the 3 R's of leadership. And so we'll talk about that, and it's going to help us through this time of uncertainty, hopefully. And then the third thing that I just want to mention is that this topic is so deep and so complex that there's just no chance that we can get through everything in the short time that we have together today. And so let's stay connected. So what's next? I'm sure we'll have opportunities to continue to inform and educate one another. And I rely on you guys too to send me really good questions and information that you get from agencies and things like that so that I can balance out information as it's published. So please be in touch after this webinar. So first thing, I just want everybody to take 2 deep breaths as we get started. We're not burning too much oil with 2 deep breaths. Being mindful and patient as we get through information is super important at this time. And so we want to make sure that we are taking the time that we need to do our research and become educated, but also as leaders in our community, let's remember that people are looking to us to be the calm voice of reason at this time. So thanks for making sure that you take care of yourself. So I wanted you to know where I get my resources and who I trust in the human resources world. So I have been a member of the Society for Human Resource Management for 15 years, and I am an active contributor to their training portfolio. So I speak at conferences for them, and hopefully you'll see some publications and things like that in the future, as I've been invited to do some writing for them too. So I'm super excited for that. The guidance that comes from SHRM is trustworthy, and it is research-based, and it's always balanced, and it's as current as we can get. So I lean on my friends there. They have public information, so information that anyone can access, and then members only information. So you get what you need at whatever level you need, but if you haven't been introduced to SHRM, as we call it, welcome, and let me know if you have questions. So before we get into the how-tos and the what-tos, I just wanted to mention that it's really important that whatever decisions we're making right now, that they be guided by sound advice. So I'm looking, when I talk about this topic with my clients and with the public, I'm looking at public health guidance, official government orders, and then trusted experts, people who are certified and licensed. So attorneys, certified HR professionals, and people who can interpret things like government orders. And everything that we're going to talk about is going to boil down to some written document most often, a rule, a regulation, or an order, capital O. And so that's open to interpretation. If you noticed on my introductory slide, I'm a Sun Devil, so go Devils. I studied Spanish literature. And so my course of study undergrad was words, semantics, language, how we communicate with one another, both artfully and technically. So as we go through these uncertain times, there will be lots of debate and there will be lots of question as to what something means. So just because we publish a rule or an act, it's going to be up for interpretation and probably disagreement. And so we'll just need to know that going forward. My clicker going here. All right, you guys ready for some what the heck's going on here? So these are questions that I've been getting from my clients and from my friends in the public. And so I've put them together as sort of question and response type, okay? And so I just want to talk you through these, and then whatever questions you have that are remaining at the end, which I'm sure there will be many. There's an infinite number of questions that remain right now. We'll get to those too. All right, so what are my responsibilities to pay employees? So this particular webinar, of course, has been put together for employers. So people who are employing 1 to 1 million people in your workforce, what are your responsibilities? And what are some things that you should be looking out for in terms of what to do next as things unfold? So first thing is there's this concept that runs in the background of human resources employment called exempt and non-exempt employees. And we're not going to belabor the definitions at this time right now, but those are our technical terms that we use when we talk about who's eligible for unemployment and who is not eligible or exempt from unemployment. So hourly non-exempt employees typically just need to be paid for the hours that they work in your business, and pay isn't guaranteed. Salaried employees, we sometimes call them salaried or exempt employees, they are going to be required to be paid. Oops, I can hear somebody else chatting. Somebody's mic is unmuted, but I'm sure you'll fix it. All right, so exempt employees are those employees that receive a weekly salary regardless of the number of hours that they work in your business. Generally, for any week in which they work, their full salary is due. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and we won't pull the Fair Labor Standards Act apart right now, but know that if you have salaried employees that are working at any point during any week, and it could be working in their normal job duties, new job duties, telecommute duties, or something else, they're probably going to need to be paid their full weekly salary with little exception. That would be a good question for private follow-up. Or typing up a specific question, and we can play around with it. Employers still need to pay on time right now. There's no exception for delaying payroll, so run your payroll. If you're having a problem with cash flow, you're going to need to talk to your bank, your attorney, or somebody that can help you with that, because there's no exception. I have quite a few people asking me about advancing pay, and so I've dipped into my network and I touched base with a handful of labor and employment attorneys. I talked with John Hyman, who is out of Ohio, and I trust his advice a lot. And I talked with Nicole Atala, and she's out in Washington, D.C. I talked with Carrie Francis and Sharon Ng, and they're here in Phoenix, both labor and employment attorneys, partners at Stinson. So the question that's been coming in and why I reached out to them was, if I pay my employees extra now, can I get credit for it later? Really good question. And so the jury's out. There was disagreement between the attorneys, which happens. And I also have another attorney in my back pocket. That's my husband, Luis Ramirez. And so he's helping us with questions and answers too. If we pay somebody in advance right now, let's just make sure that we get it in writing and that we have a repayment agreement in place so that when they come back to work and there are wages that they're earning, that you're able to deduct for that advance payment. So if you're sending people home and somehow finding a way to pay them, which I do have a handful of people who are doing that or who have done that this week, let's talk about making sure that they get a written agreement in place that that's an advance on wages. It's not just a gift or a bonus. So it was an interesting question. In Arizona, if employees are out of work, you have the authority to designate the time out if they have PTO, vacation, paid sick leave. In a bank with you as their employer, you can designate the use of that time. Other states, employees in other states, if you have employees in other states, that's not always the case, and so we have to be careful. But here in Arizona, we can do that. So if an employee's out at this time and they're out because they choose not to come in because their kids are at home or something like that, they are eligible to use their paid sick time. And that's part of our Arizona state rule that says if there's a public health emergency or schools are closed and kids are home, paid sick leave applies. And so that's a valid reason to use that paid sick leave. So they can designate themselves, or you can designate as well. Federal rules don't require vacation or paid sick time as of right now. As we know, there are open conversations on the Coronavirus Relief Act, and I'm going to mention a few things about that later, but that's just right now as of this moment. Arizona does have paid sick leave along with 12 other states. Some cities do too. And so we want to make sure that if our employees are sprinkled around geographically, that we check those local rules and state rules. And please remember that in for-profit business, volunteers are not allowed under federal wage and hour laws. So those are some of the pay questions that have been coming in, like just right now in this moment. What am I experiencing? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those underlying issues like paid time off and sick time in just a minute too. If you have independent contractors in your business, that's a different relationship than employees. Okay, and you probably know that already. I hope that you have an agreement that's written with them that designates them as an independent contractor. Look at the agreement and see what it says about who pays what when and what the deliverables are. Review those contracts. Most often, independent contractors work as needed, pay is as earned, things like that. It's a little bit more separated, than an employment relationship. And of course, when an independent contractor is no longer needed, the benefit is sometimes that you can just let them go without major repercussions. You're not paying employment taxes to them. They're not eligible for benefits in your company. They're not eligible for paid sick time under state laws. If your company is subject to Family Medical Leave Act, they're not eligible for that. And if you do need to cut them loose because the work is low, the levels are low of need, they would not be eligible for unemployment. So sometimes what happens, and I've been, like I said, doing this for a while. So I was an HR consultant and director throughout the Great Recession. And so one thing that we did see is independent contractors going to file unemployment and trying to claim that they were actually employees and that they were due unemployment. And so that's where that written agreement comes in. It's real important that if you have independent contractors, you have a good agreement that separates that relationship. One question came in, really good, simple question. Can employers impose immediate changes in the workplace? The answer is yeah, we can. If it's a pay-related change, you really should not implement changes to pay or benefits like PTO if you're going to reduce PTO or something like that, not until the next pay period. Because employees are engaged in work this pay period with the assumption that they're getting the same rate of pay and the same benefits that they had before. So we really try to give a lead time of one pay period. Job duties can change at any time, and other terms and conditions can, change at any time unless you have a union agreement or a written employment contract. In Arizona, most employees are employed at will, which means that an employee or an employer can end the employment relationship without cause, reason, or notice. That's what at will means. So if you need to let people go because your business is not producing revenue right now, that is an at-will employment decision. Usually it falls under that principle, unless there's some other written agreement in place. When employees leave your employment, they may be eligible to seek unemployment. So this is just a screenshot of the unemployment page from the state of Arizona. If you go there, it'll look familiar to you. So right now there is moving guidance. The federal law has kind of opened up and is allowing states to amend their laws to ensure that they are covering enough scenarios related to the current health emergency to make sure that if somebody is ceasing operations, that the employee who no longer has work has access to unemployment through the state. And so that you've got a couple of notes here on the slides, and I'll make sure that we get the slides available to everybody following this session. But unemployment might also be available if an individual self-quarantines or chooses to leave employment because of risk. And so know that that's a little bit more open and available than normal. And at this time, there's no relief for employers in terms of what the effect will be on their unemployment account. So typically what happens is the more claims we have, the more our insurance rate goes up. And that looks like that'll be the case now. Again, the same thing did happen during the recession. As employers laid off employees, their rates went up for unemployment in subsequent years. and came back down over time. But employees may be more openly or more like easily, they may be able to access unemployment benefits more easily during this time. There are 2 requirements for employers in Arizona. One is to post the required poster. If you have a virtual workplace, I always recommend that my clients create a folder in a shared file that has all of your required posters just as documents or links, and this is one of them. And notice to employees who become unemployed is also required. And that's usually a sneaky little known fact running in the background of HR brains, is that in most states, there's some sort of sheet or pamphlet or something that we have to give out. In Arizona, it's a 2-page pamphlet that we have to give out to employees who are let go, lets them know what their rights are for unemployment claims. And then there's a link in there too. So again, you'll get the slides and those links are live. All right, another question is, what about OSHA? This is a safety issue, health and safety. So generally, OSHA requires that employers provide a place of employment free from recognized hazards. And so, as employers, I am hoping that you're considering, doing things like assigning employees to work by telecommute, remote work at home. If that's not a possibility, in order to limit hazard and exposure and illness, I hope that you have a published and required disinfecting and sanitizing routine by now. If you still have employees coming into work, you should have some standards in place. We should be talking to people openly about required personal hygiene practices while at work as well. HAZCOM, so hazard communication is another standard that lives in OSHA guidelines. And OSHA, for those of you that this is new dip into HR alphabet soup, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA. And HAZCOM standards are the ones that tell us if our employees are exposed to hazardous materials like chemicals, like cleaning supplies, like bleach. What do we have to do to protect them? So some information will be at that link. Number 1, you have to give them a safety data sheet or make it available in your workplace. You don't have to give it to them, but just make it available in your workplace. And make sure that people know really practical things, like you can't mix bleach and ammonia. And there's ammonia in Windex. And so we can't mix those together without the risk of causing a very serious hazardous situation. So as you work to clean and sanitize and disinfect your workplace, please find out, using safety data sheets, what are the chemicals, what are the interactions of chemicals that we need to watch out for. I think that in the news, gosh, not that long ago, it was sometime around the holidays, there was a very unfortunate accident at a restaurant where an employee mopped the floor with a bleach water solution on top of a chemical that had already been placed by a night crew who was buffing floors and cleaning, and there was ammonia in there, and it caused the death of an employee. And because it was so quick, and the employee inhaled that gas that was created. So let's be very careful if we're introducing new chemicals and new responsibilities, okay? Recording standards. If an employee becomes ill at work with the virus, with COVID-19, and some other viruses as well, communicable diseases, we may be required to record them to be compliant with OSHA standards. Now, recording doesn't mean we send anything to OSHA, but it means we record it and we keep it in our workplace. So make sure that we get on board with recording standards. If you are giving employees new duties to clean and sanitize, please provide them with the required protective equipment. And so if there is protective equipment based on a certain chemical, it will say so in the safety data sheet. So again, that's where we go to see if a chemical requires eye goggles or something like that, or latex or rubber gloves or something like that. It'll tell you on the safety data sheet what personal protective equipment to give to your employee to interact with that chemical or that equipment. So that's that. Let's keep them up, keep them supported and safe. What about employment sectors that are considered high risk? So this question came up, who's kind of high risk, because folks are wondering, am I going to be responsible for a workers' comp claim if somebody claims that they got sick with the virus at work? And so essentially, the short answer is probably not. It's going to be really hard for people to prove to the insurance carrier that they contracted what's called an industrial illness. So it's not an injury, like a workers' comp claim where my employee falls and hurts their back. It's an injury. We go on what the employee tells us and some supporting evidence. With an illness, an occupational illness, the burden is to prove that you contracted it at work. And from what I'm hearing in the legal and insurance community, that's going to be a really tough standard for employees. And so we're not terribly concerned about workers' comp claims, except in these high-risk sectors. So we're just keeping those in mind. And those folks that have employees in these sectors are being asked to take additional precautions, which we could dig into privately if the need be. All right. So we're starting to hear these terms, state of emergency, shelter in place, quite a bit more. I have clients in San Francisco County and City, and so this became a reality earlier this week where they were required to shelter in place. And what that meant, and the order that came out on that one was about 10 pages long, and so we dissected that, and we're still trying to learn practically what it means, because again, an order came out and everybody disagrees about what it means as to whether or not their business can remain open. So essentially, what we should feel reassured about is that even in emergencies and shelter-in-place situations, government operations continue, key employees will be continuing to work. Healthcare providers will remain open either by choice or by mandate. Groceries and markets will remain open, so they're not closing groceries and markets, even where we have state of emergency and shelter in place. So we have to help our employees relax that the supply chain is, it's going to work for us. We just have to be patient. Take those 10 seconds of deep breathing. Okay. And from what we've seen, other essential providers are also going to be able to operate. So, for example, a plumber, an electrician, things like that. I've seen also that organizations that service communications and telecommunications, that they are considered essential as well. And so we still have like our Cox Communication people and their subcontractors out in the field doing very important work to keep people connected. And so we'll just, again, with patience and a methodical approach, we'll dissect these orders. But it pretty much means that you stay put unless you're able to go out to work, and limit your trips to groceries and markets and things like that. And just, kind of closing that thought too, as employers are forced to close, like if you are not in essential business, then your employees could either be assigned to work from home or they may be furloughed or laid off. And so we'll talk about those two terms in just a minute. Some people are going to start talking about family and medical leave, which is a federal law, and it typically applies to employers with 50 or more employees in a 75-mile radius. So if you're already in that group, you probably already know it. You know what it means. If you're not, then you haven't been subject to the Family and Medical Leave Act yet, but there may be an exception coming for smaller employers. We'll see how that unfolds in the Relief Act that the federal government is working on right now. In one version of it, we did see that employee count drop to 25 for the purpose of giving employees a protected leave to address their own illness or their family member's illness during this pandemic. So we won't get into deep dive into family medical leave. That could take an hour, and you'd probably all fall asleep on me. But this is one of those things that's running in the background, and we're watching to see if it is updated in terms of lowering the threshold of employee count so that additional employers would be subject to these rules. There was some guidance that was provided in the Act already that relates to pandemic, and so I did pull that out. And so, of course, when we are asking employees to take FMLA leave, we want them to certify that leave, it's called. Typically, we have a packet of information that they take to their medical provider, and there's a process, and there are forms, of course, it's HR, so there's forms. So in a pandemic, we are going to try to make an exception even under family and medical leave, knowing that employees may not be able to get to their doctors if all they want is paperwork. Doctors are very busy, and so they're protecting their time and their resources. And so there may be a waiver in terms of paperwork requirement to certify a family medical leave. And so that's what I was just chatting about. So maybe doctor's note might be required, and healthcare might be hard to access. And so, we're really going to be careful and cautious about our decisions to, let people go because they feel that they might be covered until we have time to really play it out. Okay? And remember to, under Arizona paid sick leave, you can request a doctor's note after an employee has been out of work for 3 consecutive scheduled shifts if they're choosing not to come to work. But again, during this time, we might waive that part of our policy because it might be awfully hard for somebody to get a doctor's note. So we're trying to balance that need to staff our business if we're still open with those paperwork requirements. And, as we are demanding of our employees that they provide paperwork or they get fired, like say that's hanging in the balance, you provide me the doctor's note or I'm going to cut you loose. Let's make sure that we just do a quick check that any of the practice, any decisions that we make about employment, so if we decide to terminate someone or demote them in the business, that we check and make sure that it's not having a discriminatory effect on a protected group within our workforce. And, that pretty much means like, is my decision to not approve FMLA, is it only affecting workers who are over 40? Because being over 40 is protected by the Age Discrimination Employment Act, DEA. So we want to evaluate if we're saying no, or if we're terminating people, am I terminating people who are in a protected group? And so again, we have limited time today, but I want to throw a couple terms out there for you so that you know that there's something kind of like a little like pique your interest if it's important to you, and then you can do more research or you can ask a follow-up question. Okay, so we can't get too deep into it, but that's another important thing to do. Are my employment decisions during this uncertain time having an adverse impact on a certain group within my team? All right, so we have lots of movement in terms of businesses and schools that are closing. And so as employers, we have so much information coming our way pretty much, every hour, every minute. And so I want you just to remember to be a good listener to your employees, to do your research through government websites, school district websites, things like that. Get curious and just try to be as flexible as you can with your policies for paperwork and your decision-making process before you decide to terminate someone for violating, a doctor's note rule or something like that. So what are employers doing now? So lots of employers are engaging in what's called social distancing. And so over on the hranswers.org webpage, I've posted some resources just like everybody else. We want to share, but we don't all have the same place. And so social distancing, what it is and guidelines and things like that. I have a little link to a Santa Monica health department or a university public health department that they presented a nice little 2-pager. So we can try to describe it to our employees and share with people. What does it even mean? People are talking about social distancing. What does it mean? Well, in short, it means my employees are not working within that 6-foot range of one another. I think, I've heard 4 to 6 feet. So I would like to, be cautious with that. So if I can assign people to different spaces or stagger their work places, if you have employees working at stations, maybe we can separate them a little bit more. If you have employees working in close quarters, we want to check on ventilation and things like that too, so that we can engage in social distancing, so that as people cough or sneeze or spit while they talk or whatever it is, all very natural human things, we want to make sure that they, that isn't coming in contact with somebody else. Lots of my clients and lots of the public were talking about working from home. So that's an option too. And people are starting to discuss furloughs and layoffs, especially my clients who are in New York City and New York, who are talking about that today. California already started earlier this week. We'll see what happens as things continue to change in terms of government orders to shelter in place or to close non-essential businesses. Now, a furlough means that an employee is still on your team. They are listed as an active employee. And so what that means is, like, if you have employee benefits, your employee is still going to be eligible for benefits during a furlough, typically. If you, if they have paid sick time available or PTO available, they're still going to have that available to them during that time. You may have to look at rules that you have to use it and adjust your PTO, balances or something like that, making sure that it at least meets the minimum requirements under the Arizona regulations, though. But essentially, a furlough is a temporary work stoppage for certain employees, and they're still employed. And of course, a layoff is a terminated employee. they no longer work for you. And if they go to, for example, seek unemployment, then it's likely that they're going to get it. And the other things about furloughs, though, is, we have to check for adverse impact, which we talked about. So now you're all experts. Check and make sure that we're not furloughing people all, in a protected group without a very good business reason. Lots of employers, when we think about layoffs and furloughing, if you are going to have more than 100 employees impacted, you're going to need to probably work with an attorney on it closely, because there's an act called the WARN Act that really regulates how we lay off large groups of people. For smaller employers, you're going to be looking at things like tenure. You might decide that it's more important to keep your experienced team members on and lay off people that have less experience. There may be job functions that you can combine into different, into a new position. So you're expanding a job role and you close a small department. I see those things happening in different businesses. We have so many different industries represented here today that it's hard for me to give like specific examples, but those are the things I'm seeing. So reassigning work duties, laying off, a front desk person, but keeping the office manager is an example of something I saw today. So lots of decisions to make there. I really encourage you guys to be come up with options. So don't be thinking that you have to have one solution. On one end of the spectrum, you could just continue business as usual unless you're told you can't by the government. So that's option A. And then maybe option D is shut down completely today. Okay, those are two very different ends of the spectrum. There must be two other things in between that you can come up with. So just for the sake of being strategic leader, come up with two options. Can you temporarily furlough some employees and lay some people off? Or can you keep everybody on but reduce their hours? Do you need to look at pay rates and reduce pay rates for a short period of time? You can think about those things, because if you remember back in the other slide, we talked about, yes, employers can change things like pay. You just need to give a little bit of lead time. Some employers are offering employees loans. Make sure that we have repayment arrangements in writing. I have a couple of clients that have employees going into people's homes to provide services. They're reimbursing their employees for cleaning supplies. And lots of employers have been so resourceful, and they're opening up all types of other access to resources like work from home. I heard someone this morning mention that they bought their assistant a new laptop and they're just going to worry about it later. They bought it with their own money, but they wanted their assistant to be able to work from home. So they did that. So those are some of the things that I see employers doing and talking about. And there are a million other things, but we'll keep on trucking here. A couple other technical things if your employees are getting sick. If an employee appears sick, can I ask them to stay home? The answer is yes. They may be eligible to use their paid sick time or sick leave or PTO or vacation. And so this one is an interesting question. So I think, let me check something here. All right, I may have an updated slide. So this is one of the things that is changing this morning. So can we take an employee's temperature or conduct medical screening? Typically, the answer is no. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's considered a medical exam. But today, the official guidance, even from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, is maybe. So if we are going to take people's temperatures at work, we want to make sure that we are doing it in a private place, that we're not showing other employees what his temperature is. We're record keeping who we're taking their temperatures. And I am not really advocating that you guys engage in this right now. I'm just saying that it's not clear if we'd get in trouble for it anymore. Yesterday we would have, today maybe not. So things are changing always. And if you're going to take temperatures, please don't do it in a back office that has bad ventilation. You can't bring employee after employee in to do that in a small, poorly ventilated space. So lots of things to think about. Definitely talk to somebody if you decide you want to engage in some sort of practice like that. Okay. If an employee gets tested for the virus, can you compel them to share the results? And the answer right now is yes. You can, if someone tells you they're being tested, yes, you can ask them for those results. And employees who are suffering from symptoms that look like the virus can be asked to stay home until they're symptom-free for 24 hours. And if an employee is out of work, we need to make sure that they know how to get a hold of us if they present with symptoms while they're out of work. So it's not their scheduled work day, or you've given them a couple days off. Friday they get to start to feeling sick, make sure that they know they're required to contact you prior to reporting to work if you're still working in person together or if they're working on site. And if an employee tests positive, so anybody that's worked with the employee in the last 14 days probably needs to be sent home. And so for small businesses, that could be really huge. But that's the guidance through the CDC right now. So sending employees home who work closely with the employee, and the person who tests positive, we need to get a list from them of all individuals that they came into close contact, 3 to 6 feet, with in the past 14 days. And that's tough to do, but it is definitely something that's recommended, again, through the CDC if our employee tests positive. And we should not be sharing with other employees, customers, or the public the name of the employee who tested positive. That's confidential information. If you have a small team, it's going to be really hard to keep that from being stated, but state your commitment to confidentiality during this time, because we do know there's a real issue with stigmatizing people that do come down with things like a virus, the pandemic, in this pandemic type situation. If you share an office building with other businesses, make sure that you talk to your management company. They probably have some sort of cleaning precaution they'd like to take. Okay. Disinfect your own area appropriately.
I'm gonna take a book off your shelf, okay? Okay. I'm gonna grab one of your Percy Jacks.
All right. So we have the Coronavirus Relief Act on the docket, and I checked before our call. I'm looking over my phone to see if anybody texted me. I told them, text me, send me a note if anything comes up while we're on the call. Don't see anything yet. So it's still being looked at. I don't, I guess I don't know what the best term is being considered. We had it stall out earlier this week for technical changes, and then major changes, substantive changes were made to the act. So right now, if it comes through, these are a couple of the major provisions, and please rest assured that if this happens in the next day or so, we're gonna take it apart. We're gonna make sure that you get a fact sheet or a checklist, or we'll find one from a trusted source and we'll share it right with you. But if they pass this act, some of the employment provisions is that employees may be eligible for a job protected leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act if they've been with the company for just 30 days. So if you remember back, we were talking about it, and we said that the employee would have to be with the company for 12 months to be eligible for family and medical leave. But at this time, if this is something that passes, that 12-month standard goes down to 30 days. Another part of the act is that it may provide 80 hours of paid sick leave for affected employees who are subject to quarantine or required to care for a child who's at home due to closure, eligible immediately, required on top of already required state sick leave or company benefits. So on top of anything you're offering, this will be added to that. So those are two of the major provisions that we're watching. Again, I'll be in touch with the local first team to share information as it becomes available on the act. All right, so if you need more information, we just updated our site today. It has a little bit of info. Thomas has done a great job, and the team at Local First, you have a great website going. So I would say check that out. If you need additional resources or asking more questions about employment, you can visit our site. Let's talk about leadership for a couple minutes before we move into quick questions and answers. So I was thinking really hard, and I do my best thinking out back, cleaning horse poop. So if you want to learn more about me, I have horses. I have a horse and a mule. I have chickens. I'm surprised my roosters haven't crowed during our call, but it looks like it's going to rain. So I was thinking while I was doing my chores, how can we best lead through this time of uncertainty? Because our employees are looking to us to guide them. They always look to us to guide them, but especially now, they're looking to us to step into our leadership and shine a light on what's right. So these are the three things I came up with, and I wanted to put them into a framework that was easier to understand and just remember. So I called it the 3 R's of leading through uncertainty. And so the first thing we're going to do is be respectful, resourceful, and third, resilient. So when I'm thinking about what does it mean to be respectful, talk to your employees about your company values. If you're going to make a statement that is going to, inform someone that their benefits or their pay or their work is changing, talk to them about what the company values and how this is not this decision that you've made is not separate from that, that you care deeply about them, that you care about your customers, and that is the central reason that you're doing that. You want to preserve your business probably. So you're making tough decisions to preserve your business so that you can continue to operate in the future. Remember that beliefs vary so greatly on this topic, health topics, politics, religion, very, very different belief sets and values across the board. And so be respectful to your employees as they express beliefs that are not in alignment with your own. People live different lifestyles, different diverse views on everything. So just be careful about your assumptions and be curious, and just don't assume that you have all the answers. Like I said, I've been, leading happily for a long time, and there is not a day that goes by that I don't reach out to someone that I admire and I love who is a leader and ask them to help me with a question about leadership. How do I do this for my clients? How do I do this for my team, my community, my family? Don't assume that you've thought of every option. Respect the leaders around you, respect your network, and reach out to people and get those ideas. Let's be resourceful. So be thoughtful, tap into your resources. Being resourceful to me also means checking our sources. I'm trying to be really careful about just being worried about things I see on Facebook or even LinkedIn or whatever it is. Yesterday, the clickbait or the mostly false thing that caught my eye, and I was like, oh no, it was that Amazon was going to stop delivering. I was like, oh no. And we know that Amazon has not been our friend, but in different times we need different solutions. So when that happened, I was like, man, there were people that are going to have real concerns about that. It wasn't true anyway. So it was just clickbait or whatever. So check your sources. Let's stick with those government trusted, certified, licensed leaders. Try out options. I mentioned that. I want you to come up with option A and option B for your business, option A and option B for your employees. I want you to brainstorm with your network. I want you to brainstorm with your employees, not AK for ideas, but ask for ideas. Consider your options. And being resourceful means being persistent too. So don't give up. Keep at it. There are going to be resources made available to communities over time, and so be persistent, be dedicated to researching those resources, whether it's Small Business Association or otherwise. Let's just keep at it. And resilient, in terms of what it means, is the ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. So I think that we can all commit to being resilient leaders during this time. And to me, resiliency also just means that we're going to bend in this situation, but we're not going to break. We may have very different businesses on the other side of this. We may come out with our businesses looking very differently, but it's going to create fluidity and flexibility and dynamicism across the board. It's not going to break us, and we're here for one another. So being resilient also means asking what you can do to help. So, like I said, I'm here to brainstorm and help as much as I can. I know there are others in my field and others that are doing the same. So let's definitely pool our resources. Thinking about how we can innovate and modify our businesses. Think about setting boundaries so that you can continue to be resilient as well. Setting boundaries means like we're not coming into the office, no exceptions, guys, right? Accept what you can't change. That's also another important foundational concept of resilience, is that some things we can't change. And so we will learn from them. We'll take what lessons there are, and we will create a solution that works for us. Monitoring our emotions is also an indicator of high level of resiliency and emotional intelligence. Do I know what I'm feeling? Can I tell what other people are feeling? Let's practice good emotional IQ or EIQ. Being grateful and thinking of positive things. There's going to be a very important balance as leaders between optimism and practicality. And so let's make sure that as we share information that we soften the blow with important comments about how much we care about people, how much we believe in them, and we believe in our ability to get through this, and then looking at options. So those are a few things in terms of leadership that I really wanted to just put out there. Resilient leaders are great at listening to others. They probably practice writing, so writing things down and capturing ideas. Also, resilient leaders are typically really good storytellers. And so we don't have much time for storytelling today, but we can tell stories about the last time that we dealt with something difficult and how we got through it and what we can learn from it and what we can take into today's practice. I hear lots of people talking about meditation. Do it if it's your thing. I do chores where that's my meditation. Get outside and get active if you're able. People like my mama, who's in a wheelchair, she's paraplegic. It's hard for her to get outside anyway, but we're trying to encourage her to at least get out into the front porch, get some of that vitamin D. And when we have to let go of something, as resilient leaders, we do. And so where we let go of control, for example, of the fact that employees may file for unemployment, we have to let that go. We have to continue on with business. Come up with ideas that make sense to you in terms of how you can still enjoy life today. So is it Arizona State Parks and Trails? Is it something else? But commit to it. My family has been going outside and playing basketball. We've been playing around the world at 5:30 p.m. every day in the driveway. It's created a nice ritual for us, and it's also been a good way to get a little bit of sunshine. So think about what that makes sense for you, okay? And then these are 3 books that I have read in my time as a leader that I really recommend if you haven't read them yet. They're amazing books about leadership, gratitude, and persistency. Or persistency? Did I just make up a word? Being persistent. So Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a great book. The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu is a wonderful sort of scientific spiritual book about gratitude and joy. And then if you've never heard of Deanna Nyad, she swam from Florida to Cuba, or well, actually Cuba to Florida. She swam home. And it was not on her first trip that she did it. And it's an amazing story of perseverance. And this came out from my friends at Society for HR Management today, that we all commit to being a little bit extra. So extra kind, extra caring, extra supportive, extra communicative with your workers. I encouraged an employer today when we were on a client call to just record a video to say hi to her employees because she hasn't seen them. She traveled internationally in the last couple of weeks, and so she's kind of on home stay right now. And so I said, hey, just check in with them. I bet they would love to see your pretty smile. So do something extra to be communicative, and let's keep this conversation going because I know there's a lot more to talk about. So that brings me to the end. They're in the slides. You're going to see more resource links, but I'm not going to go over those now. So I am ready for the firing squad of HR questions if you have any.
Yeah, so Nikki, there are actually a couple. So again, if you have questions, just make sure you drop them in the chat box and I'll just go ahead and read them to Nikki. If you have further questions after the webinar is finished, you can either email Nikki directly or you are able to email Local First, anybody at Local First Arizona, and we will pass those along. Okay, so the first one is, can you give some info on the Arizona Shared Work Program?
So somebody asked about that this morning, and I had to admit I'm not very well versed on it, but I actually have it pulled up on and bookmarked right now to look at tonight. So I'm not too sure how it's structured anymore. I haven't participated in it with an employer since the recession. So I'm going to have to look that up, but I commit to providing you with some feedback.
Perfect. Okay, so the other one is, how does furlough work? I have not done it before.
Yeah, so furlough is a systematic process of putting people on leave, basically. And I can send over some additional resources that the Society for HR Management puts together for us. The ones that are public resources, I can share those. Obviously, I'm not able to share things that are within their member site, but they do have some good stuff, a little checklist of furlough thoughts. But really, it's not terribly complicated. You're going to need to inform your employees that you're enacting furlough, which is a temporary work stoppage. And then you're going to tell them what that means. Are they out for, are you anticipating it will be a week or 6 weeks or 12 weeks? The longer it goes, the more likely that it's going to be a layoff eventually. And so you have to kind of weigh your options. Remember, if you furlough someone instead of let them go and terminate them, they're going to still be eligible for things like paid sick leave. So if the act passes, employees who are furloughed may have access to paid sick leave.
And so to follow up, there was one question that says, to clarify, somebody just asked another one, hold on.
Sure.
It bumped it up. To clarify, does furloughing allow employees to qualify for unemployment?
Yeah, so unemployment, yes, they are employees who are still actively employed, so have not been technically terminated in your system, may still be eligible for unemployment if their wages decline by 50% or more. So the insurance unemployment office will take the claim. Like if my employer cuts my hours because we're a restaurant, we have no more dining available or something like that. I go and I file for unemployment, and my employer still gets a statement, and it says, what's going on. The employer has to answer that and timely. And you're going to tell them, well, we're closed right now for dining, and I don't have work available. So there's no work available. The employee's still employed, but they don't have work available. And the part of the process of getting unemployment is also verifying your wages, what you were getting before and what you're getting now. So they're bringing pay stubs. And so employees will still be eligible. Even if they're still employed, they may be eligible for some level of unemployment based on how much they were earning before you had to furlough them or reduce their hours.
Okay. The next one is, if we reduce staff hours, can we say no PTO for a period of time?
You would want to modify your policy and republish it to your employees. Employers are permitted to change their perks and benefits at any time. And so, like I think I'm trying to think back to the slides, we kind of say don't do it within a pay period. Give people a lead time of at least a pay period. I like to give people, a 30-day lead time, but during now, that's not really reasonable, right? So yes, you can revise your policy, publish it to your employees. You can cut back on PTO and things like that. Taking away a benefit that's already been earned is going to be tough. So like if you've already given an employee, your employees an allotment of 40 hours of PTO on January 1st, it's going to be really hard to take that away without causing some damage. But could you do it? I would say, probably, but you might want to talk to an attorney about what that looks like. But I think, you can take it away because it's a benefit, just like you can change their pay, you can change their benefits. But you'll want to republish your policy. So sorry, it's kind of it's a little bit gray area.
Okay. So the next one is, will the WARN Act or the WARN Act be upheld if we are required to close due to mayoral declaration?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so if you're so that's the 100 employees or more. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if that one's a question. I'll come back to that. Will the PowerPoint be available? Yes. After the webinar, we will be posting it on the Local First website. And then the last question is, will we be paying additional unemployment beyond what we paid into if we lay employees off?
Yep. So what happens with that? So you have your unemployment, the tax that you pay on wages to your employees all the time. Well, it's actually on the first $7,000 of wages each year. And that goes into your account with the state. If your account drops to zero, then the federal unemployment coffers sort of kick in. So your employees will still get the coverage that they're entitled to, and you won't be paying any more taxes on that. And so they won't send you a bill or anything right now. There may be some sort of requirement in the future to pay once they analyze the accounts of employers, but that's not something the employees will still get what they need. And, if you've paid your part, then typically the federal government steps in and pays the next part.
Okay, so one more. This one says, have you seen any job matching across industries? For example, hospitality industry is being shut down, but healthcare is booming. There's a lot of transferable skills. It could be a good temporary position for discounters.
Yep, I do see a lot of conversation in HR space and recruiting space talking about how to get word out to employees who've been let go of different companies that are hiring. So as an employer, like one of my clients that is a restaurant, they did have to close, and so they have each morning been sending out a little message to their employees. They didn't let them go yet this week, but they've got them on. They're still communicating every day, and they're saying, these are the things we're seeing if you're interested in working in an industry that's open right now.
All right, and one more.
That's okay.
We are in Pinal County that hasn't made any proclamations or declarations at this point. Would you recommend that we follow suit to what Phoenix and Tucson are doing?
Yep, so I am also in Pinal County, broadcasting from Pinal County right now. And to protect your employees, I think that you probably should consider following the rules and regulations or proclamations that make sense to you. So I can't speak for everyone else, but my team, we started working from home. We canceled our on-site visits and training already last week. And so that was sad and unfortunate and certainly a loss of revenue. But it was a decision that I made to protect my employees. So everybody will have their own personal decision, and that's not my place to make for anybody or to feel even a certain way about it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. And again, you can email questions to info@localfirstaz.com, or Nikki has her email up on the screen. You can also check out this webinar and then a lot of other resources at www.localfirstaz.com/COVID-19. And I think that's it.
All right, guys, thank you for coming and thanks for having me. I hope to continue to help however I can.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.